I think everything and anything is happening when we dream. I don't think there's like a one answer. And I like this idea that the ancients had, that there were different dreams that serve different purposes and they have different properties. You know, some dreams are divine dreams. They come directly from the gods and goddesses. They don't need interpretation because they work magic directly through your body and soul.
So how are you doing today? It seems like you've had a busy day. Were you doing a class right before this?
Yeah, right before this, I did. It's actually quite good because, you know, when you kind of get on a roll and you start talking about something and you're warming up. So it's quite good to do an interview after a class, I think. Yeah, I did a class on throned goddesses and looking at the throne as a possible ancient meditation posture.
Interesting. So, yeah, well, tell me a little bit about that. Like, because there's a book that I came across some years ago, which was all looking at some ancient artifacts and these different postures that these figures were in, and supposing that they were some kind of meditation posture. And so people experimenting with being in those postures and seeing what comes up. So who are some of the goddesses you're looking at?
Well, I was looking at the seated lady of Çatalhöyük, you know, the very famous Neolithic woman that was found in Çatalhöyük, a very voluptuous woman sitting in a throne with her hands on the heads of two big felines, and Cybele and Demeter and Persephone, and looking as well at the relationship between the throne and the underworld, because the throne does seem to be associated with underworld goddesses in particular. For me, it looks to me like the throne is a kind of architectural form that represents something like the primordial mound, like this point or this place, the seat of power. And obviously it's related to rulership, but I think it must also be related to a guardian of the underworld somehow. Like they seem to sit atop portals to Hades, and they are perhaps a kind of visual representation of the organizational forces of heaven and earth, with this person, this entity upon them that is acting as a kind of mouthpiece or directing the energies of heaven and earth into the populace.
Wasn't one of the oracles in Greece, didn't they find oh, you're going to have to help me out with this, but someplace, maybe it was the Oracle at Delphi, and they were thought to be seated atop a kind of cavern of some kind, with fumes coming up.
Yeah, that's one of the ideas about the Oracle at Delphi, is that they were sitting above a chasm from which these natural gases that had psychoactive effects were emanating. And in that intoxicated state, their mad ravings were used to construct an oracle. I mean, gases can do that to you. And there is, I mean, I think there's also something really interesting about oracles that are constructed out of hearing utterances in background sounds, like water babbling, for example. I read years ago, and I've never been able to find any evidence of it elsewhere, of, I think they were witches in Russia, oracles in Russia, that it was this continued folk tradition where certain women had this skill to listen to a stream and construct oracles out of the babblings and the murmurings. And it's something I can really see. It's like a sort of it's like an auditory pareidolia. You know, when you start to see faces in things, you start to hear sounds and sentences and words when you listen to sounds like the babbling of water, or you know, kind of background voices, or the wind passing through trees and leaves.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Very interesting. So as part of your class, did you guys do a seated throne meditation?
Yeah. I think a lot of people aren't used to sitting up so straight. to do meditation. But one thing I notice, as long as you can be comfortably supported underneath, your feet are supported, it actually feels very natural to sit up very straight. And one of the things I've noticed, because I've been spending a lot of time meditating in, I'm living in Archaea Epidavros in the Peloponnese, which is on the edge of the sanctuary of Asclepius, the kind of healing holistic sanctuary of the divine physician, son of Apollo. And the village where I live, there's lots of ruins of temples, and there are chapels and churches built on top of some of these temples. And there's a beautiful little chapel dedicated to the Virgin Mary on the Nisi down on the bottom of my road. And that chapel is thought to be built on top of the ruin of a temple to Aphrodite, or possibly Athena. They're not totally sure what goddess it was, but it's definitely built on top of a temple. And that whole area was the Acropolis for the ancient village or the ancient town. So the place is just littered with temples. And when I meditate there, I always sit in one of the chairs in the chapel, and the land just feels so energetic and powerful. And I find that when I sit in that posture, I begin to like move. It feels like Kundalini energy passing through me. Like I find myself moving back and forth. And I often do nod when I meditate, but there's a super emphasized, more intense version of it when I meditate there, and not only moving back and forth, but I feel myself like spiraling. And I think, Peter Kingsley writes a lot about, and Gregory Shaw, who you interviewed recently, this idea of Hellenic Tantra, that there were these practices, these meditative practices, these consciousness altering practices that sages passed down in a tradition similar to the way they did in India that we've just lost. But there was this shamanic healing tradition in ancient Greece that we've forgotten about, but clues about it, I think, are revealed in the art and the iconography and the statue postures. And I do think that some of those throned goddesses throughout Egypt and Greece seem to show someone meditating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to kind of just experiment with some of these ideas, right? And see what happens.
It doesn't. Yeah, well, on Saturday, I interviewed a friend of mine, Lee Gerard Barlow, who works with magnetism and mesmerism. And he's quite famous in the UK for giving these occult esoteric tours of the British Museum, the Egyptian galleries there. And he looks at these objects from a kind of magical, alchemical perspective, and has learned a lot about Egyptian culture and religion, and about the hieroglyphs and the symbolism of some of the hieroglyphs. And he's been like adopting the postures of some of the statues to just see what happens, like holding it for a period of time, like using it as a practice, because I think it's a great way. Like these statues are obviously representing something meaningful, because an enormous amount of time and energy was spent on creating them to be exactly as they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what were you like as a kid?
Well, I've always been the black sheep of the family, apparently. My dad called me a pretentious wannabe boho as a teenager, and that name has kind of stuck. But as a kid, I was always really into lucid dreaming. Like, that's always been my thing. And I lived a lot in a kind of dream world. I was a bit of a daydreamer. But also I had like super complex, amazing, rich dream experiences that led me to map out the places I used to visit in dreams. And I would go back to the same dream place every time. And I still go back to it now. It's like there's recognizable places, landscapes, architectural areas. So yeah, I was really into that, and always into figuring out the nature of reality, thinking about everything in the cosmos being interconnected. I just have always been quite philosophical, I think, even when I was little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a really rich dream life when I was a kid too, and knew how to lucid dream before I even knew it was like a thing. I just figured out that if I thought about a place or a scenario or a person that I wanted to revisit right before I went to sleep, that I could just go back there. And yeah, there was like less of a a kind of boundary between waking life and dream life when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember telling my dad once that I would rather be in my dream life than in my ordinary waking reality in Croydon. And I think there are elements of escapism in it, definitely, because I grew up in a kind of crappy area in Croydon. I found that I loved nature. And I think I spent a lot of time observing nature. And even though I didn't live in somewhere that you might immediately identify as a biodiverse, rich area, I lived like on the edge of a sewage farm next to an industrial estate on a main road. But there was this, I had access to the woods and I would spend a long time on my own, just looking at nature. And I think that was the thing that gave me a sense. I guess it was this kind of natural intuitive sense for as above, so below, like just observing nature close up. And then dreaming was a form of escapism for me because my life was very unexotic and I loved reading, I loved novels. And so I fantasized a lot and I kind of overlaid my ordinary humdrum life with a more kind of exotic, adventurous, imaginary life. And I really remember very intense experiences of imaginary play. We used to play Eskimos, and you don't say Eskimos anymore, but we used to play a game where we would pretend to be living in igloos and hunting for seals. And I remember I could simultaneously see myself in the ice and see myself in my living room in Croydon at the same time. So I think cultivating like a rich visual imagination was a huge part of why I was good at dreaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. I was also a really early reader, and I loved reading any books where the protagonist was like going into the other world.
Me too, like, exactly. A Magician's
Witch
Nephew.
in the Wardrobe and
I was just going to say Magician's Nephew is my favorite ones. I thought that was such a good when they're in that kind of liminal zone as well, where all the trees and the puddles that they jump into to go to the different realms. I loved that sort of thing. And I also loved any books like fantasy books that had those imaginary maps in the beginning, like Lord of the Rings, where they have those imaginary terrains. And I used to love drawing maps. And that's one of my sort of dream training processes is to do like dream cartography. So you create a dream landscape. And in creating it, you can then visit it in dreams. And I do workshops with children where we invent a fantasy theme park and they draw it and they map it out and they think about what it's going to be like. And then I do a meditation where they imagine themselves exploring it. And it's amazing how easy they find to just totally be there and experience it 100%. And I get so many mums contacting me afterwards saying, can't believe like how this like just was so easy. They're really into it.
That's great that you're doing workshops for kids. Like, I think one of the things that happens to a lot of us is we have like a rich imaginal life when we're very young, and that kind of gets cultured out of us, as we go to school and we learn about, real geography, real history and that kind of thing. And then maybe some of us have to reclaim it later in life, So for you, did you ever have a period where you were disconnected from that and you had to return to it, or was it a thread right through?
It's kind of been a thread right through, but it was definitely severed when I had a small baby and I had like not enough sleep and was very sleep deprived. And it was interesting because I'd just always taken for granted the fact that I had lucid dreams, that I had this incredibly rich, amazing, really, really deeply, I can't tell you how enriching my dream life was. It gave me a sense of self completely because I would, often in dreams, I'd be like, even in the moment, I think one of the things people forget about lucidity quite often is it gives you this sense of bliss and euphoria of just this absolute sense of presence, but presence beyond anything you can imagine in your waking reality. I often say that, when you think about dreams, sometimes you think of dreams as being like you're an avatar kind of plonked in this imaginal landscape. But when you're lucid, you have this absolute full body experience of being of expansion, because you realize you're not just the avatar, you're the entire fabric of that universe, which is an incredibly expansive and wonderful feeling. So I really, really missed that when I wasn't getting enough sleep and I had a baby crying, and I really lost my sense of self. So when I finally got back to getting enough sleep and having lucid dreams again, I was so grateful and so happy. And I suppose I had, since a kid, used lucid dreaming as a sort of wish fulfillment technique. And
Mm-hmm.
I would just do things that I liked and go on adventures in the
Mm-hmm.
dreams. And then when I lost it, I I guess I went through a kind of phase of personal inquiry and really thinking about what I wanted. And when lucid dreaming came back, I looked at it more as a a guide and started to ask questions in the dream to see what dreams wanted to reveal to me. And I had a different relationship with lucid dreaming after that.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. When did you start working professionally with dreams and these dream workshops and things like that?
Well, I've been writing about dreams for maybe like 15 years. I wrote for the Idler magazine. I've wrote a paper for the Journal of Para Anthropology, but I ran events about dreams. I ran lucid dream workshops for about 12 years. And then in the last, I wrote a book about the history and culture of dreaming, especially in the kind of Western esoteric tradition. So from Anatolia through Mesopotamia and Egypt. And that was published by Inner Traditions in 2022. And then since then, I've also been running retreats in Greece because where I'm living now is actually a city that's associated with the sanctuary of Asclepius. And it's very, as soon as I visited for the first time, it felt like home, and everything just kind of magically manifested, so that I now take groups there, and we visit the sleep temples and the sites associated with dream rituals, and also things like we visit the site of the sanctuary of Demeter and Kore, Elefsina, places where the mysteries occurred, where people had these transcendental, non-ordinary states.
Mm. So that's your whole life,
Yeah,
or a big part of it.
it is my absolute whole life.
Wow. Amazing. Did you ever meet Edward Tick in your travels? He takes people to Greece and has been doing that for many years.
I know the name, but I have not met him.
Hmm. Yeah, he'd be an elder in this kind of work. I mean, he's been, researching ancient Greek dream practices and healing for many, many years, written a number of books, and works with a lot of veterans. So he does sleep incubation with people, and yeah. But he'll probably, I think he's in Greece in like October or something. He's got a trip coming
Great,
up.
me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll check him out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always curious, like how other people think about dreams. So, what do you think is happening when we dream? What's going on?
I think everything and anything is happening when we dream. I don't think there's like a one answer. And I like this idea that the ancients had, that there were different dreams that serve different purposes and they have different properties. You know, some dreams are divine dreams. They come directly from the gods and goddesses. They don't need interpretation because they work magic directly through your body and soul. And
Mhm.
that's, I guess, the ideal kind of a dream that you would have in a sanctuary of Asclepius when you go and you incubate in the incubatorion. So there's that dream that has a direct, undeniable effect on you. There are the dreams that require interpretation, and there seem to be dreams that don't really amount to very much at all. And I think dreams can be reconfigurations of things that you've experienced in your life. They can be windows into the collective unconscious somehow. They can transport you to other dimensions. I think that they're everything and anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Yeah, I think yeah, everything that you mentioned. I've experienced those types of dreams, and they're all very different. Um, so, like when a dream comes to us, or when we're in a dream, where do you think that place exists? Like you talked about mapping out that territory, that landscape. Um, do you think that's all in the mind, or do you think it's, another dimension? How do you conceive of it?
I guess I see the entire cosmos as being a dreaming, a process of dreaming, like we're dreaming things into existence all the time. And so I think that reality has a multi-dimensional nature, and that we are creating these realms when we dream them. And the more we dream them, the more real and habitable they become. I do think that we construct our personality in the dream realm. You know, babies spend an inordinate amount of time in REM, and I think it is because they are making sense of their place in time and space, and they have to construct, they have to build a foundation and a framework upon which to build their sense of self. It's an important process that we go through, and I can really feel that because I do remember a lot of dreams from when I was very small, and I remember having dreams of pure white, and I remember them being filled in over time. And
Hmm.
I've been co-host for a few years on my friend Anthony Peake's YouTube series, Consciousness Hour, and we interviewed this amazing woman called Rebecca Sharrock, who has highly superior autobiographical memory, which means that she remembers everything that's ever happened to her,
Wow.
especially if there's an emotional element to it. She also is on the autism spectrum, and she's synesthetic. So there are these interesting overlaid aspects to it, and synesthetic um, perception probably has a lot to do with how she remembers so much stuff. And she tried to explain how her memory works, that she kind of color codes things. And I guess, you know, a lot of people use the idea of a filing cabinet to talk about memory, even though memory isn't necessarily working like that. It can help people make sense of how they organize their memories. But she can remember, you give her any day, any calendar date, and she can remember what she was doing on that calendar date. And I was very excited to interview her because of the fact that she can remember everything. That I thought this must mean that she's lucid in her dreams all the time, which would be amazing. And she
Hmm.
was. So that was amazing to talk to her about that. And she said that she also had this experience of pure whiteness, and that the dreams were filled in over time. So to me, that pure whiteness feels like a kind of source that I came from. And I do remember having a like a flash of where I was before I was born, and the sense of I've got twin brothers, and the sense of my brothers before they were born. And I always, since being a child, knew that I came from the stars, I came from the cosmos, and that's where I'll go when I die.
Hmm. So when you say we construct the dream world, we construct our ourself in the dream, I don't think you mean the conscious ego. Um, what do you mean by that when you say that we're doing it, we're constructing it?
I think we are constructing our sense of self, our personality, the who we are. I mean, I remember when I did a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat, and it's interesting how much your sense of self hangs upon your relations and your relating to other people, your conversations and your words. And if you stop the inner dialogue, if you stop relating to people with Vipassana, you can't even make eye contact on that 10-day silent meditation retreat. You suddenly realize how fragile self and individualistic perception is. It's a construct that we have created in order to survive in this world. And, you know, I guess that's what we are doing all the time, just as human beings inhabiting a planet. I always loved the Dr. Seuss story, Horton Hears a Who. You know,
Hmm.
he can hear this mayor who lives on a world that is so tiny it exists on a speck of dust on a flower. And Horton has very big ears because he's an elephant, and he's very sensitive, so he can hear it. But I always loved thinking about that because I think it's a very philosophical story for children, because you have to think about the fact that this tiny voice of the mayor can only be determined by someone who's sensitive enough to hear it, because it's drowned out by this great world that exists around it. And I think we exist on a planet that is a tiny pinprick in space. And so all of our local laws, we have to kind of calibrate to them in order to exist in this planet. But we have a cosmic, endless, eternal origin.
Hey, I want to take a moment to speak with you about this channel. Currently, only 11% of viewers are subscribed to the channel. I think those numbers are terrible. So, if you're enjoying this content and you want to help out the channel, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, you can become a member of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon, which will give you access to early release of full ad-free episodes, plus access to the archive of the first 100 episodes of this podcast. It would really help me out and allow me to keep creating content like the interview that you're watching right now. Okay, thanks so much. Now, back to the interview. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I woke up one day with a kind of cosmology that was new to me. Um, and I just thought, well, I've been kind of looking for an answer to this, like where do we come from? Where do we go after we die? What are we here for? And there it was one morning laid out kind of on my doorstep. And it's very much like what you're talking about. What was given to me was that we each come from a different solar system, and we're the god of that solar system. So every sun is a soul, a person in the cosmos. And um, we kind of are looking for adventure. And so we travel to different galaxies in order to experience what it's like to live there. And our whole purpose here, it's like a school. And we have to learn how to live in harmony in this place. And then I think when we figure it out, then we go off looking for another experience, another adventure. Is that something like what you're thinking of?
Yeah, I just think there's a continuum. It's a
Mhm.
continuum where we're everything and nothing at the same time. And, I think it's very interesting actually. If you want to inquire as to what ancient people thought about the nature of reality, of consciousness, of the cosmos, you have like the native people of Australia have maintained this continuous culture in which all of these things have been kind of shared through the millennia. And it's a culture that has preserved beliefs from 40,000 odd years ago. It's incredible. I think we should be asking them because I think they've got the answers about this kind of thing. And the perception of the entire cosmos being a dream part of it's just a dreaming process, is a continuum of consciousness. We're always generating thought forms, and those thought forms then become real forms in the world. And I often think it's probably not an accident that the native people of Australia didn't really create any alphabet, any written language in the same way that other cultures did, that then is open to misinterpretation or adaptation. There's a kind of consistency in representing visual forms and understanding the world through art and through the actual landforms that means that it's perhaps less susceptible to corruption and to misunderstanding.
Hmm. Hmm. And the oral storytelling that kind of weaves it
Yeah,
all together, right?
exactly. Because there's also something in oral storytelling that requires active engagement all the
Hmm.
time of your memory faculties. And, it's spoken of again and again and again that releasing your fear of death, of understanding the secrets of the universe, is just remembering. It's a process of pure remembering.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And if we continue that oral storytelling, we're always participating in the creation of the dream of the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we've stopped doing that. And I think it makes us susceptible to falling into other people's dreams about what the world is.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree.
Hmm.
There are so many distractions now in the world, and those distractions take us away from the world itself. I guess it's a bit like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's idea of the noosphere, this intellectual sphere that is kind of homogenizing human consciousness so that we're going to eventually reach this omega point, this um, complete inward explosion of data, of information.
Hmm. Interesting. So would like something like adopting English as a global language be a part of this process he's talking about?
Um, I suppose that that's some aspect of it. I think we should all be speaking Greek. Greek, like the more I learn about Greek, the more I'm sort of educated by Greek friends that are experts in the magical properties of the Greek language and the Greek script. The more I think I'm impoverished by being an English speaker because it seems um, so surface level as a language. There's something about the Greek language when you get, I guess, because so much of English comes from Greek to begin with, it feels like it's it's not getting to the essence, the like true nature of the ideas that the English language attempts to express because it's deriving from this ancient source, and the ancient source just gets right to the heart of the the ideas.
Mm. Yeah, I think the thing with English is it's so muddled because we've incorporated so many different languages and mixed them up. That's kind of what makes it wonderful too. It's like this kind of global mutt of a language.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, it's so much is revealed if we do the etymology into all these words that we use, without really understanding their roots. And then when you go to the roots, you go, oh my, it's like a little, I always think of it like a zip file with like a lesson in it. You kind of unpack all this meaning and the kind of history that's embedded in a single word.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine, he's like a modern day Hierophant, a Greek friend who's living in Athens, Alexandros Pagidas. He gave a great presentation and he was talking about how he views ancient Greek as being, I'm maybe using the wrong terms, but the essence of it is a sort of self-illuminating language. And in order to understand English properly, you have to then learn and understand the Greek roots. Whereas to understand ancient Greek roots, it's self-illuminating because the word itself reveals the truth. You don't need to know another language to convert it into the truth. It is so true that there's a kind of essential felt quality in the words of ancient Greek.
Hmm. Yeah, I felt the same when I was learning Sanskrit and, using Sanskrit in chanting mantra practice. I found like English is not a good language for chanting, and I would think about that, and I think because it is cobbled together and it's removed from the root sounds and all of that, but then when you get to these primordial languages, each syllable has a vibration that opens a door into something, some kind of
Absolutely.
understanding or
Yeah.
experience. And so if your language is made up of those kind of seed syllables, it's incredibly powerful, and it tends to roll off the tongue like it was meant to be chanted or sung.
I know exactly what you mean, and I do feel the same way about ancient Greek. And there are more extended vowel sounds in ancient Greek as well. So it is more of a kind of lyrical, poetic, singing type of language. And one of the women I work with in Greece is the incredible researcher Maria Maragou, who wrote the kind of best book on the mysteries of Elefsina, which so far has only been published in Greek, but it's going to be out in an English translation this month. And she describes ancient Greek as being like a cosmic codex that helps you see the true nature of reality and helps you to magically conjure up desired outcomes. And by understanding it, you see the true nature of the world. And I can really recognize how whatever native language we speak or whatever language we recognize changes the way you see the world.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think our minds are shaped by language. And so the more, I think about it sometimes as like decolonizing my mind. If I learn other languages, it expands my perception of the world. It helps me to see things in a multitude of different ways. And I also think that something about English, like when you start learning, it might be the same with ancient Greek, but if you start learning Sanskrit, you realize just how underutilized our tongue and our mouth are in the forming of sounds. I remember like my first like chanting workshops. My whole jaw and my tongue were tired at the end of the day because it never moved in so many different ways, and there's so much importance placed on like where the tongue touches the palate to create different sounds. And I just realized, man, I've been only using my half my linguistic potential speaking English, you know?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that is true of ancient Greek as well. And I think all children should learn the ancient languages and hieroglyphs in school. Ancient
Hmm.
Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphs, I think, would be the perfect
Wow.
trinity foundational stones of learning.
Mm. Yeah, one of my favorite writers, Camille Paglia, says she's really, over the past like 30, 40 years, she's been really advocating for the incorporation of comparative religion in grade school, just to give kids more of that global cosmic perspective. And I agree, that would be incredible.
Well, there's something I was talking to my friend Lee on Saturday because he's really into the Egyptian mysteries. And I started to study hieroglyphs during lockdown. I've always been really interested in Egyptology. I run like an Egyptology lecture series, but I started to learn hieroglyphs properly during lockdown. And it was incredible because they are pictorial forms, but they obviously have phonetic values. One of the things I kind of realized is that um, if you were um, if you were able to read and write hieroglyphs in ancient times, because the hieroglyphs are representations of real things in the world, every now and again you would find yourself in a space where there would be a configuration of these real things in the world that would
Right.
spell out a message from God. How amazing is that? Like, that's a completely different way of seeing
Oh my
the
God.
world, that the real things of the world are talking to you all the time. And
Yeah.
it's in that respect, I think the hieroglyphs, the hieroglyphic writing systems, because obviously it's not just ancient Egypt that had hieroglyphic writing systems, they're the primary writing systems of the world. They are kind of holographic in a sense because they give you this
Mhm.
absolutely kind of multi-dimensional view of reality. And then we moved into more kind of abstract letter forms, and the oral tradition subsides and people become more literate using these shorthand writing forms, and then our consciousness changes as a result of that, because I think more than anything our sense of self, our consciousness is shaped by words, and ideas usually come in the form of words. So it's a hugely important part. And I think, people talk often of dead languages, but these dead languages are our origins. And it's not necessarily about them being spoken in everyday use, but
Mhm.
an understanding of how the ancient languages formed humanity, I think is something all school children should learn. I did read recently that they're reintroducing hieroglyphs into schools in Egypt, which I'm not sure whether that's happened yet, but I think that would be an incredible idea. And I do run workshops for children around hieroglyphs, and we've even done like cuneiform tablets and things like that as well, because I think that these things, um, children love ancient history, and it's always been more interesting to me than war history, which is what we learnt a lot in school, unfortunately. And I think that it would be better if children were taught about emerging cultures, because that sort of reveals why we ended up in uh, bad situations with warring and nations and uh, borders and things like this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd never thought about that in terms of the Egyptian hieroglyphs, but it totally makes sense because they're these pictograms of like birds and animals and plants and things like that, right? And so if you're walking around the world, you're seeing your language in the world, and it's like there's something about that that is just seems so right in
I
terms
know.
of
And then you
your
think about
relationship with the world. Hmm.
even like large architectural forms or furniture, for example, would be styled according to a hieroglyph. And so I've often thought as well that when someone dies, their furniture is arranged in a tomb, and that furniture is speaking as well. The
Right.
arrangement of the furniture, or a pyramid is a hieroglyph, like everything is a hieroglyph. So uh, it it does make sense that you have this more kind of direct experience of the world if your language and your script is representations of the things within it.
Hmm. Yeah. You're able to like directly read the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Oh, that's fascinating. I'm gonna mull that over for a while, I think, as go on my walk this afternoon. So one of the things I found interesting about your book is, like I'd mentioned, I've had Edward Tick on the podcast a few times, and I've done quite a bit of reading about Greek dream practices and that kind of thing. But you go back to Egypt, and you show that the roots for all these dream practices, incubation, interpretation, divination, are in ancient Egypt, which I wasn't aware of. So, what were the Egyptians doing with dreams?
Well, it's hard to know what they were doing before the Greco-Roman period, because this is when Imhotep becomes syncretized with Asclepius, and where there are formal dream incubating shrines. But there was, in neuromancy, the practice of using dreams for divinatory purposes seems to predate the use of dreams for healing purposes. But I suspect that dream incubation as a practice, as a way of communing with the dead and with gods and goddesses, way predates Egypt. It seems to be something that cavemen were practicing. It seems to be a Stone Age practice that you would sleep on graves, and you would sleep in caves, and you would sleep purposefully to have meaningful dreams. And I've always believed that dreams were fundamental in the creation of afterlife beliefs, because one of the defining features of dreams is that you can dream of the dead and you can have very real feeling interactions with dead people. And so to someone in ancient times, and just as it is to someone now, it's like absolute validation that the human soul perpetuates after the physical body dies.
Hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, though, I think in modern times, people often discount that. And there's this idea that dreams are the mind just processing the events of your day or of your week or whatever, right? And so it's not given the same kind of significance that it is in other cultures or Western culture in previous times. Um, I mean, what do you think we lose when we lose that kind of understanding of dreams?
I think even the most kind of hard-nosed reductionist scientist, if they'd lost a loved one and they had a meaningful, lucid interaction with a deceased beloved, they would feel that as a meaningful, transcendental experience, because you get so much of this. You can write papers about things, you can believe in a purely sort of materialist world, but you still are moved when something like that happens. And there's so many uh, anecdotal accounts of these really meaningful, deep, revelatory dreams that people have. So I think it's about having direct experience. And I guess um, there's kind of developed something of a kind of cult for wakefulness. And I think that altered states, those liminal experiences, those not knowings, they're part of the mysteries of life. And maybe we are developing a culture that doesn't have mysteries anymore. I think about this idea of mystery quite a lot. Like, up until very recently, we didn't know about certain foreign lands. And I think often about sailors that went on these great voyages, and they didn't know whether or not they were going to fall off the ends of the earth. They thought they might actually fall off the ends of the earth. They thought they might actually encounter terrifying sea monsters. Like, imagine the unknowing and the level of mystery of a quest or a voyage like that. It's just unfathomable to us now. And I remember even as a kid in the 80s, I didn't know, like, there was a sense of mystery about foreign lands, like certain foreign lands. I had no photographs to refer to, no like direct experience, no TV shows or films shotting them. Like you just didn't know. We watched Indiana Jones. We thought that was a fairly true to life depiction of the countries that he explores, you know. So I think we now think we know everything, and that has made it harder for us to appreciate mystery, to imagine, to kind of send our consciousness into the unknowable realms. And perhaps that's something that ancient people were more familiar with because less of the world was truly known or seen in full daylight, was photographed, was evidenced. And I think about something like, for example, look at Lilith, the screech owl in Mesopotamia, seen as a kind of night demon, and how that may have been owls. Like, obviously, people in Mesopotamia knew owls existed, but if you live somewhere that's always dark and you just see this kind of vision of a demonic flying swift being and it looks terrifying and it screeches, that you could overlay this kind of sense of an entity upon that. You know, you don't think of the owl as being a you know, a species, a subspecies. You don't look at it in the same sort of scientific way we look at it now. You see it as an entity, a being. And I think about this in relation to like the nymphs and the nature spirits in ancient Greece as well. On my road in Greece, one of the things that I love is there's a nymphaeon, like a really early nymphaeon, where there are just niches carved in a rock where springs were emerging. And I always, whenever I'm there, I see tortoises, I see butterflies, and I see them as the nature spirits. They are like living entities that embody the nature spirits. They are the nymphs. And you feed and you offer, make offerings to the nymphs. You increase biodiversity, you increase life in the world. Like that's what ancient adoration is about for me in ancient Greece. It's nature worship.
Yeah, totally. Um, you know, if you have like we live kind of in the woods here, and I remember last summer there was an owl who was coming around. But before I saw it, I heard it, you know, lying in bed with the windows open during the summer. You hear this wild sounds, you know, that kind of sound human or sound like some kind of spirit. Very strange, you know, very weird. And then I went out one night and I was looking for it in the trees. I had a little flashlight and I got a glimpse of it. And it was no less startling or weird and mysterious when I saw it and it saw me. So I don't know what people have to do in order to cut themselves off from that, you know, because for me it just seems so natural to be kind of struck by the wonder of the world and the little beings that are constantly running around and but to only see something through that reductionist materialist scientific lens, you know, I don't know what kind of like effort that must take within someone like a Richard Dawkins who I'm sure if he had a dream about a loved one, he said, "Well, of course, it's just in my memory and it's just coming up and that's it."
Mm.
You know?
Yeah,
Do you work with people who maybe come to you because they feel like constricted by their worldview and they want to expand them, like you know how someone might go to a psychedelic retreat because they want to like they feel like things are too constricted and they need like a breakthrough. They need an opening to the wonder of the world again. Do people ever
yeah,
come to
no,
you?
definitely have that. And one thing that's been really interesting to me the last couple of years is people that are training in this new kind of psychedelic therapy realm are coming to the retreats because there is a certain disillusionment with psychedelics already in
Mm,
terms of the monetization and the commercialization of them. A lot of people are feeling like they need to feel comfortable navigating the dream realm to really be grounded operating in that psychedelic sphere, because there's a lot more potential, I would say, for like corruption and abuse of power in the psychedelic realm than there can be for dreaming, because generally speaking, um, dreaming is self-limiting. Like
mm,
it's something that I would say people could do more safely than psychedelics across the board. It may be
yeah.
harder to get really powerful effects, but it it kind of gives you what you need, and it's it can be
Yeah,
just as powerful and just as potent. but it's less reliably so, I suppose.
Yeah, it's more autonomous, I guess, and there's no fear of like the therapist or the provider's influence on what you're experiencing. You know, you're in the dream world. Yeah, I've been telling people that for years. You know, I did a lot of work in the psychedelic realm and saw a lot of the things that were going wrong there. Particularly, like one of the things that irked me a lot was the medicalization of the psychedelic experience and kind of the demystification of it. You know, we're going to give you this in a white room with like maybe one flower in a little vase, nothing to
One
influence
fake
you.
flower as well.
Yeah, right, because we don't want something like that's
Yeah.
could trigger your allergies or something,
Mm.
right? And that to me is a real kind of negative co-opting of that experience and the trying to contain it and control it too much. So what I've been telling people is, look, if you can get in touch with your dreams, you're going to reliably have a psychedelic experience at least once a night.
Mm,
And so
exactly.
it takes practice maybe to bring, some of the experience back into waking life, but it's there and available. So just talking about like what kind of cuts us off, when I speak to people who smoke a lot of cannabis, they often feel like they have no dream life, like they're not bringing anything back into the day world. And when they stop cannabis, all of a sudden they're like flooded with these like big, meaningful dreams. Have you experienced the same thing in the people you work with?
Yeah, I do get a lot of people that don't have very many dreams because they smoke a lot of weed and then they have this rebound effect. But one thing I've also noticed is that a lot of people smoke weed so they don't dream. And so you have to address that issue as well, if that's the case. Some people are plagued by intense emotional dreams, and that's why they get into smoking weed in the first place. So you have to kind of look at it a case by case basis. But um, I mean, cannabis is a bit like an antidepressant, I suppose. Like it should be used for short periods of time to, if you have any sleep problems, it can help you have deep sleep. It can help you fall asleep quickly, and it can help you have very good quality non-REM sleep. So if you were going through a period of depression, for example, the way that antidepressants are supposed to be used is to enable that non-REM sleep, enable you to get the restorative sleep that you need in order to make more sensible decisions and be more robust following that period. But habitual use means that I think this is why so many people that smoke a lot of weed end up stuck in a rut, because dreams help us process, evolve, move through things and find new ways. And if you aren't remembering your dreams, and even if you don't remember your dreams, but sometimes you might wake up and feel like that was good. I'm not quite sure why, but I feel better. They do help you move through things. And I think sometimes if you smoke a lot of weed, you can end up stuck in that place where you started and you don't kind of move on through a dream journey, because there's something really interesting about dreams. They do seem to be journeys. They do seem to involve forward motion or motion through space. And perhaps not having REM sleep means that you're stopping in that sort of journey and you just stay where you are.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely tracks with reports I get from people. You know, they come to me because they feel stuck in their life. One of the ways they're stuck is they're overly reliant on this particular substance. And then when we talk about dreams, it's like, well, I don't dream, or I don't remember them if I do. So it's like every night they're just dropping into a void.
I
Yeah,
would
so
recommend getting onto nutmeg instead. Nutmeg is a
yeah,
very underrated substance, and it can be really good for relaxing you and helping you sleep, but it doesn't inhibit dreaming.
yeah, I
It has a
find
similar effect to cannabis, I think.
yeah, I find magnesium also
Mm.
just as like an overall kind of muscle relaxant, but doesn't seem to interfere with my dreams. Um, this I'm thinking about right now, like, the Jungian idea that the psyche is producing dreams in order to help us individuate, to help us grow and evolve. Um, I think there's some truth to that personally, but I think it's too reductive. Like you, I think some dreams come from uh, a particular spirit, the cosmos, or they come from someplace outside of myself, or even from certain people. Like I've had different shaman and spiritual teachers show up in my dreams. It's like they created the dream to come and communicate something or to work on me while I'm sleeping. Uh, I mean, have you investigated like the Jungian approach to dreams? Like, what do you think about that? You know, one of the core ideas is that everything in the dream is an aspect of your personality, and that's
Hmm.
one way to read the dream. I mean, what do you think
I mean,
about that
that's,
approach?
yeah, I guess that's quite simplistic, isn't it? It's a bit like sort of Gestalt dream ideas about every aspect of the dream. I mean, it's one of the things I'm quite interested in doing. Like we did this practice of dream theater, where on the retreats, the person who's had a dream will be the dream director, and the other
Mm,
participants will act out aspects of the dream. And it's quite interesting because you can allot a role to someone that's like an inanimate object, for example, but they say their experience from their perspective. And it can be really interesting and there can be great insight in that. I guess I think, in terms of, especially in terms of like collective unconscious and this idea that there is just this, I think there's this cosmic pool that we're all part of and that we're all drawing from all the time. And so if as everything is interconnected, then we can be all of these things simultaneously. We can access other people's memories and other people can access our dreams because everything ultimately is connected. And we can see the past, present, and future in dreams. I mean, one of the most fascinating aspects of ancient dream interpretation for me is the absolute preoccupation there is with precognition, with predicting the future, and not predicting the future insofar as you are seeing direct images that you will see at a later date. It's more that the entire world is oracular, like this idea of the hieroglyphs. The entire world is oracular. It's always revealing itself in every given moment. Within every atom of the world is contained the seed for everything else in the world. So you can take a frame or an image of any, so many oracular things involve lots, like thrown dice or thrown knuckle bones or whatever it is. And or looking into the intestines or the liver of a sacrificed lamb. And you can see in the configuration of anything um, the bigger picture and how this could manifest in some other area of your life. So I think every part of the world reveals every other part of the world in a way. Like I guess I see the oracular nature of the cosmos, and I think everything is interconnected. So I think that all of these things are possible, but we've been living now for a long time with this idea of the individual, with the single person existing in the world. And to even think that we are separate from the planet is craziness. People that live in small scale societies in a jungle or in the forest or in the desert can't possibly think like that because they
mm,
directly rely upon that environment to sustain them in every given moment. Um, they can't sever that connection, and we've been able to do that because we've distanced ourselves from nature. We live in houses, we have plumbing, we just don't have to live in direct communion with nature all the time. But if we did, I think we'd have this much greater sense of we're part of this continuum, like the
yeah.
the
Well,
ancient Australian
it's
idea.
necessary for survival.
Exactly.
And to revere the natural world is also necessary for survival. That makes total sense. If you can like put yourself in the mind of a, kind of an animist perspective or people living in a sustenance lifestyle, right? Like, um, but we just live in this illusion that we're not reliant on nature, although we are. I mean, just whether it's the gas that feeds your stove or your car or whatever it is, the wood that you need in order to have a fire so you don't freeze in the winter time, the water out of your tap and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't take much for people to recognize that. And yet the kind of the mindset of modernity, this arrogance of the individual, self-reliant and dominant over nature and all of that,
Yeah. I
it
think that's why
persists.
small scale communities are more efficient and more self-supporting. And it's kind of how we should all be living, I think, in small self-supporting communities, because then you get a direct sense of your role in the cycle of nature. And it's another thing that I find really fascinating about, say, something like the mysteries of Elefsina, and any of these mystery traditions that kind of grow out of agrarian societies that are rituals around the cycle of life and nature. And if you ever visited Elefsina during spring, when the spring flowers are out, it's absolutely beautiful. And you get this sense that, if you live in a society that's absolutely dependent upon harvest and absolutely dependent upon good weather and a good season for growing, that these rituals are felt by the populace. When spring emerges and it's a good harvest, it's ecstatic. And they called the mysteries of Elefsina the sacred orgies. And I think it is in part because spring is orgiastic. And if you are at one with nature, then you feel the ecstasy of spring in your body and you feel the absolute explosion of life and color. It's a felt experience. And because we've removed ourselves from that, I think it was one of the things that the lockdowns during COVID had extraordinary sort of potential to get some people reacquainted with the awe-inspiring power of nature and life, and just the abundance of life in the world, and how, if we still and we quiet the traffic, the bird sounds come back, our relationship with life. I love those images that you see sometimes of villages or cities overgrown with wildness and with nature, because we do live in a very fragile, constructed culture. And I mean, I'm in Hastings at the moment, which is where I was before I went to Greece. And we had our water supply cut off because of a burst main pipe, and it was cut off for about 5 or 6 days. And that is just one pipe going, and there was chaos, and you got this real sense that people just cannot provide for themselves at all, because we don't have access to fresh water. We don't have access to hunting grounds or the tools or the skills or the knowledge and know-how to survive off the land. They're skills that are privileges to have these days, unless you grew up in a kind of country nature smart household. You're not going to know these things.
Yeah, very fragile existence for sure. I know this was like a romantic idea during COVID that people would find like a more of an appreciation for the natural world and our own fragility and all of that. But I think like actually the opposite seems to have happened, and I think something it has to do something with the way that people were told to stay inside, to not even go outside, to play sports or to walk in nature. We're told to lock down, what do they say, isolate in place or whatever, and then to do all your communication, do your work through this box, this Zoom box. Um, and what I found is like my perception was that people like the general populace went even crazier during this time, and I don't think people have fully recovered because the way I see people interact out in the world seems to be more coarse, more rude, less considerate than it was, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think that there was something of a split, because, well, in England, it wasn't very strictly observed, for starters. In other countries, I know there was a lot more strictness. You had to get permits, for example, to just go to the shop. In England, they had a very kind of loose rule that you had to stay indoors and you could go outside for a walk. And the whole thing seemed ludicrous when I lived on the seafront next to a nature reserve. Like, I
Hmm.
would just go out in the morning and stay out all day. And I mean, I remember seeing people in the nature reserve who were wearing masks, and that to me was the most like incredible thing, that they would think that they were going to catch it from what, a tree? Like, there's literally nothing there that they could catch anything from. And the sort of fear that was instilled in people was quite unbelievable, and
Hmm.
and I do think the media need to be held accountable for it more than anything else. I mean, the media has become like this uh fever pitch a terror-inducing mechanism that we've never seen the like of before. I mean, there's always been propaganda, but media as it stands now is like properly ruining humanity.
Well, yeah, and it's nonstop now. It's not a newsreel that you
Exactly, yeah.
see on the big screen once a week
Yeah.
or the newspaper. It's like it's constantly it's like a fire hose of fear-inducing information. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think media, we can blame them, but like for me, ultimately, it comes down to the individual. You know, because for lockdown, well, we moved to the country because I didn't want to get locked down in the city. And so for me, it was a deeper connection to the natural world because there was like kind of less to do other than just be in nature. Um, and that was a personal choice, and it was a personal choice not to listen to all the media, or when I heard something, to do some investigation, try to like look at the real numbers, the real data, and then make up my own mind about
Yeah.
risk and all of that kind of thing. So I think ultimately we have to put the responsibility on the individual.
Well, what is the individual though? The individual is a creation of like nurture, nature, upbringing, experience. It's like it is something that is crafted and cultivated over time, depending upon the influences that you have. Um, I mean, I felt exactly the same as you, and I think it's just kind of lucky. I can't imagine believing everything that I saw on the news. I never have done it, and I also haven't had a TV for many, many, many years, and so perhaps there's less conditioning and indoctrination because I haven't been watching the news. So I I realized that it would be very easy to remove myself from much social contact for 2 years if necessary. And I would rather do that than adhere to all of the rules. And I knew I could keep myself to myself. I didn't put anyone at risk, and I wasn't putting myself at risk. I was just like sensibly withdrawing from the ordinary world, and I was quite happy to do so. And I loved the communion with nature, and I did the same as you. Like I just used to go to there's a nature reserve around the corner from my house. I used to swim in the sea every day at dawn. And I used to go to the nature reserve around the corner from my house. And it was amazing, actually, that daily contact with the same land. I'd
Hmm.
never experienced. I mean, I've always been really into nature, but I'd never really experienced like daily prolonged contact with the same land. And I found myself falling in love with land, like falling in love with the plants and the complexity, and like actually really communing and seeing. Because also, I mean, one of the things was there's being out in nature, and then during lockdown, because you were supposed to be isolating, often I was on walks on my own, and then it's just you and the land and you and the plants, and something different and magical happens. And
Hmm.
going out to the same piece of land every day, I would see these tiny little like new plants, and I've noticed the new plants that were growing every day and the new flowers, and it was just an absolute wonder. Like I really, really loved that experience. I thought that was precious.
Yeah, I mean, I can really relate to that too. And part of me had to reconcile myself to walking the same land because we live on an island. So to leave the island required, you know, getting a vaccine and doing all this stuff that I just didn't want to do. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be here in this place for a while. I don't know how long. It ended up being a couple of years. And I thought of it as like a kind of time of hermitude and much the same. Staying put in one kind of area, you get to see all those little changes over time. And I had a deeper appreciation for staying put, getting more intimate with one place rather than always seeking novelty. Like, oh, where are we going to hike this weekend? We got to find a new place every weekend. It was like, no, walk the same land, swim the same water over and over and over again through the seasons. And I felt like I became more a part of this place and more kind of deserving of living here, actually.
Yeah, no, I I felt like, I mean, I got really into waking up at dawn because it was like the quietest time.
Hmm.
It was the time I could go and swim in the sea and no one else was going to be about. And there were certain things that I observed then, like waking up at dawn. I really developed this sense of where the sun was rising every morning, like a
Hmm.
felt sense of where the sun was going to rise. And then also, when you swim at dawn, the fish in the sea, I think they love, like the dawn chorus, they love the first rays of light on the water, and they would jump up in the first rays of light. And I just felt this like absolute like oneness with that ecstasy that the fish were experiencing, that the birds were experiencing. Like I felt part of the fabric of nature in a way that I've always, although I've always loved it and I've had moments of it, it was a more regular daily experience of it.
Yeah. 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 I'm remembering like in the morning, the otters where we have we live on like an ocean basin, so it's quite calm and protected, and so we get a lot of seals and otters and things. And the otters just kind of coming in as the sunlight starts to warm up the surface of the water and the light is glinting off of it, and they're frolicking, like they're
Yeah, it's
rejoicing
magic.
every morning. And it's like hard to be depressed and despondent when all the beings around you are just leaping with joy, you
I
know?
think dawn is the best antidepressant ever.
Hmm.
There's something magical about dawn, like more so than sunset for some reason. There's something about that movement from twilight to dawn that is just, you feel like you're there at the moment of creation. And if you can experience that every day, then that's like a special experience.
Yeah, you just made me think of that Nina Simone song. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, and I'm feeling good. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
make that
Good.
your mantra for a while. Um, we've gotten away from dreams, but not really. Like this is kind of like living in the world as if it's as significant as a dream. Like we're always like, especially if like you're kind of a Jungian type, you're looking to your dreams to interpret them for all this information. And I think like if you can recognize that life is a dream, you can look around you at any time and see the significance, see the messages that the world is offering you, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then you do, the more you see the waking world as a dream, the more likely you are to have lucid dreams because the more lucid and present you are in the waking world. So it creates this kind of feedback system that we are always living in a dream. I had this idea, I had a dream because often I do dream on things. If I have like deep
Hmm.
questions, I will incubate a dream for it. And especially with my research with ancient Greek sleep temples or the practices or being in the place, like I love to meditate or to sleep in the actual place to just fully immerse myself in the context of it. And I had a dream about the fact that, you know, I thought about this recently. I was walking through the town here and I was walking behind some girls who are about 20. And I was thinking to myself, to go back to being 20 now would be like dying because I wouldn't know what I know. There's a sort of oblivion
Hmm.
that comes with that. And people may find that idea appealing, but for me, like the thought is horrifying that I would have to do all of that stuff over again.
Yeah,
So
and lose all
I
this
thought
wisdom.
well, I thought, well, I don't know about wisdom, but it just life seemed harder, more complicated, confusing and upsetting and
Mhm.
emotional, and I wouldn't want to have to go back there. And and I just thought about how every morning, every dawn is this new life. And there is this concept in the ancient world that sleep is a kind of preparation for death. It's a little death. And you wake up and you are reborn. And the sun is often shown as this entity of light that passes through the underworld every night, passes through the land of the dead, and arises again in the morning and is reborn. And, it struck me that like every day we die and every morning we are reborn. And so what happens when we do die? Do we wake up to the great dream, to everything? And I had
Mhm.
a I had a felt dream experience of dying and waking up to everything and feeling myself as just a
Mhm.
drop in the ocean of consciousness. And I guess ancient people were perhaps wise enough, maybe because their lives were short and felt more precious and more urgent, that they had to acknowledge and um, reckon with this during their lifetimes. And maybe we're a bit complacent and lazy, like distracted, to recognize how important this is. But the idea in the Mysteries of Elefsina is that you have to die before you die, and that this helps you release your fear of death, and this enables you to truly live. And so I do think that this is vitally important for humans to experience.
Mm. Yeah, the way I took that, I mean, I'm a longtime yoga practitioner. Die before you die, to me, I always read that as a very kind of yogic statement. It's like die to the false sense of self, the constructed self, and wake up to who you really are. And that's actually going to help you be more at peace with whatever's next, because really all that dies, as far as we know, is this sense of self. The body doesn't die, it just gets kind of what do you say, composted back into the earth and everything,
Recycled, yeah.
right? The only thing we don't know is like what happens to me, little me, when I die.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is the thing, is why there's this association made with dreaming, is every night when we fall asleep, we lose our sense of self. So we are kind of dying a little bit every night.
Mm,
And I have always thought since I was a child that if you could navigate the dream space, then you could navigate the death space as well.
mm. Yeah, I think so. I think there's got to be a connection. There is though, like when you dream, there is like what we might call the dream ego. Like I'm me in my dreams, you know? Um, and I don't know if I've ever had a dream where I felt I was someone else or something different. But there is the dream me. And the way I've been thinking about dreams now, after 50 years of dreaming, is I don't know. I have this idea that when I go to sleep and wake up in a dream, that I've woken up into like a tributary on in the multiverse, like another timeline, and that could put me, you know, at this time and place, but just on a kind of different stream, different decisions made. Here I am, but it also puts me forward and backward in the timeline. But it seems, I don't know, I'm just having this feeling lately that it's just like these are just other realities. And I'm kind of like dropping in on them and like, oh, this is what it's like here, and this is what's happening. Has that ever occurred to you? Is this part of your idea that it's all connected and we're all swimming in this pool of everything?
I do think that as you kind of grow up and mature and learn more about yourself, learn more about your drives, more about the sort of mysteries of self and others, that your dreams make more sense sometimes. There seems to be more kind of continuity and sense of self, and perhaps less cryptic messaging. That's one thing I've noticed. It's more directly representational than fantastical fantasy and surreal or
Mm,
symbolic than they used to be. I mean, that's there's a more definite sense of self in my dreams now than there was when I was in my 20s. Like there was a sense of complete abandon and wildness in my dreams then, of not, I suppose I didn't really know my place. I didn't really know who I was. And so the dreams were an effort to explore and understand it. And they were like wild and wonderful and weird and surreal, and often derived from literature or films or songs that I was really into, and now they're more recognizable. Like within dreams, I'll be saying, oh, it's interesting that this thing is in my dream because I saw this thing. They're more kind of seem to be accurate reflections of who and where I am. um I do think dreams offer us opportunities to see the future, and they offer us windows to the past, because if you believe everything is interconnected, then there is no time, everything is eternal, and so you can access any time at any point. One of the things I find really interesting about talking to people at dream retreats is how they're represented in the dream is quite interesting, because very often people have dreams where they're still teenagers, and that can be a recurring theme,
mm,
that they're always at a particular stage of development, and they don't have dreams of themselves as they are at the age they are now, which I find quite interesting.
Hmm. You think that's pointing to some kind of uh, what would you say, like lack of growth psychologically or emotionally?
Maybe like a lack of acceptance or a lack
Mm,
of acknowledgement. It could be that the most redolent emotions that they have are in that time period, perhaps as well. You know, like dreams are related so deeply to our emotions that the strongest emotions we've ever felt in our life tend to be the time periods that we exist in our dream worlds.
mm,
So many people, I mean, it seems so like often spoke about, have dreams about like not failing to turn up for exams at school or university, for example, which you think is just like, surely not that many people have those dreams, but a lot of people into their 40s, 50s will continue to have these
mm,
dreams because it must have been an incredibly heightened emotional state for them at the time. And
mm.
that heightened emotional state comes to be a kind of signifier for any later emotional state, because you're always relating it back to this momentous occasion, this like key moment in your life
This
when you
formative period, yeah.
exactly, yeah. So it's a bit like you get the same thing in relationships. Like you might be having a troubled relationship with someone now, but the first troubled relationship you ever had, or the first
Mm.
intense, passionate relationship you have, you might get that person coming back because they are the representative or the personification of your intense, passionate feelings.
Right, yeah, like your kind of your personal archetypes
Exactly. Yeah.
in a way, yeah. Like you've mentioned it a number of times in our conversation, but it seems like you focus on lucid dreaming. And I guess I've like become kind of biased toward lucid dreaming. And that's maybe the influence of people like James Hillman, who was like really like keep the day ego out of your dreams. You know, he had a real problem with people like interpreting dreams and that kind of thing. He was like, just leave it alone, let it kind of work on you. And I do like that approach. I like the idea of like keeping my ego out of it, not messing with the dream. And so I guess I had this idea that lucid dreaming is kind of like getting in there, day ego coming in and manipulating the dream and messing with it, and maybe something is lost, like some more kind of direct, honest communication from the soul is lost.
Yeah. I
I'm just
guess I
putting that
think
out there,
about,
just like in terms of transparency and see what you have to say about it.
yeah,
I'm not
no,
like hard and fast about that at all.
no, I mean, I think I do remember as a kid, I was into lucid dreaming for wish fulfillment purposes, like
Yeah, me too.
for like kissing boys at school, for getting presents at Christmas, like that, and
Yeah.
going to foreign countries and flying. And this is what I did it for. And
Hmm.
then when I had my daughter and I lost my ability to lucid dream for a while, I was gutted. I mean, I still had, the biggest thing for me is the actual feeling of bliss and ecstasy. Like that's what I love lucid dreaming for more than anything. It's like an energizing, um, there's aspects of epiphany in it. Like there's strong epiphanies that I've had in lucid dreams. And so when I got back into lucid dreaming, and it was much more, like you say, allowing the dream to reveal things to me rather than me directing it and me conjuring people up or me conjuring material things up. Um, it was much more about bathing in the experience, observing the things that were already there and questioning them within the dream. That's something
Mm,
that I like to
okay.
do. And
Hmm.
then also asking, just calling out loud to the dream, what do you want to show me? And then questioning whether what's being shown to me is something that I've just thought of or imagined, or is it something that's genuinely come from somewhere else? Um, but the reason why I became so interested in ancient dream research are these descriptions of dreams that sound like the kind of ecstatic experiences that I love most about them, and that the description of these divine dreams seem to be like a source of pure inspiration and ecstasy and bliss. And that's why I'm very interested in the goddess Mnemosyne, who's the personification of divine remembrance. And it interests me so much that she was such an important figure in the sanctuary of Asclepius, for example, in Epidavros, because she is the goddess who's invoked so that the pilgrims can remember themselves in their divine dreams, that they remember their experiences. And I don't think that's just about remembering the dream after the fact. It's about remembering within the dream who and where you are, so that you can have that moment of divine inspiration, because she's not only the mother, the daughter of heaven and earth, she's the mother of all of the muses. And if you think about that, literally, essentially, she's the source of all inspiration in the world. And I think she is a muse herself, because she is the muse of lucidity, the goddess that inspires divine lucidity and vision in a dream, who enables you to remember that you're dreaming and remember yourself in the dream. And there's something about that dream lucidity that feels like inspiration. It's a aha moment of like sudden realization that you are at the heart of this creation, and that you can, one of the things that I find amazing about lucid dreaming is, I've got a friend, Daniel Oldis, who is a dream lab scientist working in California, and he did these experiments with recording dream time, and also trying to record using very sensitive equipment that records the movement of your voice box, dream speech. Because when you talk in a dream, apparently your voice box makes the corresponding movements associated with speech. And so we've spoken about how if you had a lucid dreamer doing this experiment, then they could enunciate and pronounce more emphatically the words, so that maybe it would be easier to record what the words people are saying in dream speech. And I don't know what the latest studies have shown, like whether or not it's been evidenced or not yet, but I loved that idea. And when he told me about it, I had a dream that night that I was standing in Times Square, and I remembered his study. And so while I was in Times Square, I was shouting at the top of my voice, "This is amazing." And I was trying to like really pronounce every syllable like as vividly as possible. And I had this physical sensation in my voice box within the dream that I was making these shapes and these sounds, like that I was putting extra effort into it. And it reminded me of, when people say they have nightmares and they scream, but a tiny little squeak comes out. That's probably because their voice box is making the tiny micro movements associated with screaming, but it's obviously a much more subtle movement than in
Kind of
waking reality.
paralyzed. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, there are just endlessly interesting aspects to dreaming, I think. And
Yeah.
uh, I think it has manifold benefits to our waking life. And the ancients understood that a good dream life was really, really important. And a good dream life comes from a good waking life of kind of peace and harmony in the body. So I think that's why these sanctuaries of Asclepius were about creating harmony in the entire body, and dreaming was just one aspect of the healing process. Like, you have to consider the not only the human organism, but the entire environment that the human organism exists within. And I was talking to someone earlier about how I think there was this sense in the ancient world that we've perhaps lost now, that beauty and harmony in our environment can heal us. And if you remember the experiment about the rats that are put in an enriched environment, and how they are no longer addicted to whatever substance they've been addicted to,
Yeah, the
because
cocaine or
they're
whatever it
the
was.
cocaine, they're like in an enriched environment, and therefore they just release that
Yeah,
addiction
they're
because
they're content. They're
they're having
not
a nice
needing
time.
for
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think if I think that's another aspect of the pursuit of the individual. The idea of the individual is we. It's a bit scary to be an individual, actually. It's better to be part of a whole,
I know,
part
it's
of like a
terrifying.
community, and
Hmm.
feel that the outside world can influence you, and that you can influence the outside world. That's such a healthier relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, there's a lot there. I got to tell you, I really, I'm glad you spoke to that about cultivating a beautiful, peaceful environment. anyone I've talked to who suffers from like those nightmarish dream paralysis kind of scenarios, I think almost all of them that I can remember live in kind of like shitty home environments, like no
Mm.
decoration, no real thought put into it, maybe some posters tacked up on the wall, but kind of like adolescent type environments, they're not cultivating beauty and peace and harmony in the home through, the colors around them, the artwork, nice textiles, smells, all of that stuff, right? So it really, I think, does begin there. Yeah, I'm curious, like, what is the goal of your work? What do you hope to um, benefit to do with your work? Do you have like a kind of an idea of the bigger picture, or is it just like kind of following your own interests and your
Yeah,
passion?
I think that there isn't a goal because I don't think I'm ever going to reach a point where it's finished. It's like I
Mhm.
love learning about ancient Greek and I could spend the rest of my life learning ancient Greek and I'll still just have scratched the surface. So you have to surrender to the fact that you're never going to know, surrender to the mysteries. And I guess ultimately, um, I just want to be happy and free. And dreaming has always facilitated that. And I love following dreams. It feels the right way to live for me. So I had dreams about Asclepius, had dreams about going to the sanctuary. I've had dreams about being in the Incubatorion. And I go there and it's this amazing sense of freedom and like a magnetic attraction that just makes my life flow easily if I follow dreams.
Mm. And so then, working with other people, holding workshops and things like that, is that just an extension of your own kind of curiosity and love of, talking about dreams, working with dreams, and just kind of getting more people in on it? Or
I
do you
want,
think like that it's going to help humanity in some way if more people are awakened to the magic of dreams?
I guess I had this idea and I still hold on to it of this reactivating the sleep temples by bringing people to sleep in them by I want people to have this direct experience of sleeping in these places where pilgrims have come for thousands of years to incubate dreams and to honor the gods, because I think in honoring the gods and dreaming of the gods we are helping to bring them back into the world and the gods can help humanity. And I think investing in dreams and investing in dreams also help you with having this overview effect. It's one of the things that psychedelics are often credited with, that it provides the overview effect, but I think dreams are an incredible um route and avenue to explore the overview effect. And so it can help you with things like disagreements in relationships, with politics. I think politics
Mm,
could greatly benefit from sleep and dream therapy. And anywhere where there's conflict, anywhere where you need to see the bigger picture, where you need to see multiple points of view, because dreaming is amazing at enabling you to see multiple points of view, to see things from other people's perspectives, to experience conflict but not take it personally, like all the same things that you can get with psilocybin but that you experience every night, that we can integrate and perhaps integrate more efficiently because
mhm,
they're everyday dreams. Um so yeah, I definitely think that dreaming can help. And I think dreaming should be reintroduced as a therapeutic practice and as part of a holistic health service that is about bringing a human being and a community into harmony, and not about treating diseases with chemicals and with drugs, because you're obviously not addressing the kind of source issue. People become ill because they live in sick worlds and sick communities, and often illness is a manifestation of a sick environment. So
mhm,
that's something that I think dreaming can provide insight. And also dreams can give you vision. Dreams can give you epiphanies. They can, and an epiphany you experience in a dream seems like something worth following. I mean, there is this argument that not all epiphanies are to be trusted, and I've read studies in some of the reports about epiphanies people have when they're on psychedelics, where they're not
Hmm.
actually reliable. They're like a result of a previously held idea, and they're just
Hmm.
a kind of manifestation of this previously held idea. But sometimes the epiphanies you get in dreams, they are genuine insight. They are um, breakthroughs. And I think that it's well known that certain inventors, certain philosophers come up with ideas in dreams. They provide like a really good, solid foundation because you're drawing upon all of your wisdom and all of the experiences that you've ever had to come to some big picture, to some overview of a situation. So I think they can be really useful.
Hmm.
I don't think it will do anyone any harm if they get 8 hours sleep every night and have good dreams.
Hmm. Well, and I think sometimes the really clear dreams, the kind of the problem-solving creative dreams, happen for me when I take like a little nap in the afternoon, where it's like 10, 20 minutes. It's like one dream, but man, it comes through and it's like right there when I wake up.
Yeah, that's what I encourage people to do with regards to incubation, because people often think about these sleep temples as being places where you'd go to sleep for the night, but they are
Mm.
about incubating dreams like you would lie on a psychiatrist's couch. They're like a session. They are a period of time. They are lying down to wait for a dream to come for you, which is a very different experience.
Right.
So I think that that's how I encourage people to incubate dreams, and it's the best way to go about it, especially if you're not a regular lucid dreamer or you don't often remember your dreams. The best way to start it is afternoon napping of like 20, 25, 30 minutes.
Hmm. Anything else that you recommend for people? Like, have you ever worked with some of the dream herbs, like I think like blue lotus or mugwort,
Mugwort. Yeah,
stuff like that?
not very much. One of the things that I think works really well as a fumigation is frankincense. Frankincense helps you to sort of colorfully imagine things, and it is the frankincense that's associated with mnemosine as well. And so fumigation of frankincense, I think, is pretty good. Um, Drinking organic apple juice is really good. Apples
Really?
are really good for your memory. Anything that's good for your memory is good for lucid dreaming. And
So maybe
the
like rosemary would be a good herb
yeah,
to have
rosemary's
around.
great. Yeah,
Hmm.
rosemary's great. And trying to think. I don't go in for supplementation very often. There was one supplement that I tried, Huperzine A, is the only one I tried that I noticed like definite effect that seemed different from my own dreams. But the dreams seemed more chaotic, so I didn't
Mm.
particularly like it. But they definitely seemed very vivid. Huperzine A, um, and
Melatonin seems to like produce a lot of dreams for me, but
mm,
yeah, I think like more chaotic or just kind of fucked up. Like I
yeah,
don't trust them as much, these
yeah,
melatonin
yeah,
dreams.
yeah. Um, I tend to prefer things like the wake back to bed method, and
What's that?
one, where you wake up at say 4:30, sometime where you're going to easily be able to fall back to sleep. You wake up, you don't disturb yourself too much, don't turn any lights on, but you wake up just enough to then go back to sleep and be able to more vividly remember your dreams. But the thing that I find most useful, like we talked about how so many children have very vivid lucid dreams, is engaging in the same sort of things that children engage in on a regular basis, which is
Mhm.
playing, using your imagination, drawing, painting, and writing with a pen and paper, or a
Yeah,
pencil and paper. It's like the best. And I think
totally.
this is
Mhm.
part of the reason why dream journaling works, is just the action of writing using a pen and paper. And
Mhm.
so many people now are recording their dreams with voice notes or on their phone. And I think that there's a magical process that occurs when you put pen to paper that conjures up imagery as you're writing,
Mm.
and it enables you to see things that you can't see if you're writing on a computer.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think something like for me, having the dream journal, like a special book just for recording dreams by the bed, is like the way I think about it is it sends a signal to psyche. It's like I'm listening, I'm ready
Yeah,
to
definitely.
record.
Yeah.
As does like engaging with like a dream group, having or
Mm.
maybe a therapist or counselor who works with dreams. Like when I start working with people and I say, look, start trying to remember some of your dreams and you can bring those to sessions. It's like, well, I don't know, I don't really dream. Then the next week they come, they go, oh my God, it's like the floodgates have opened up. So I
Yeah.
think it's just like kind of raising your hand in the astral realm and going, okay, look, I'm paying attention. What do you have to show me?
Definitely. Well, I really think of words as being spells. And if you set that intention, if you speak it out loud, if you write it down, um, you have already created it somewhere in the continuum of consciousness. It's written in the heavens and it's going to come. So yeah, I absolutely think that that's correct. I do think trying to get away from devices as much as possible is one of the best ways. And talking and thinking and writing about previous dreams, writing stories and reading stories is a really, I read this really interesting thing. That's why I incorporate these little stories in my book,
Hmm.
because I did a dream incubation practice for each narrative section. So that after I'd done my research, after I'd finished the chapter, I then incubated on it and had a dream that took me to the place. And then I had this experience in the dream. And then I turned that into a story so that it gives some kind of like context, imaginal, emotional experience where you're conjuring up imagery to feel and see yourself in that particular place. And that's one of the practices that I would really encourage as well, is incubating on a problem or incubating to find something out. Like I wrote an article recently about encumesis, about the practice of sacred sleep. And I had this amazing dream that I was in the encumeterion at the Sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidavros, and the sacred snakes were curious about me and they were sniffing me. And in the dream, I was aware that the snakes were actually trained by the priests to sniff out diseases and illnesses and wounds. And in the dream, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This could be true, because the other animal form of Asclepius is a dog, and they're like famed for their ability to smell out diseases and to be almost have a sixth sense for people. And the as a pilgrim, I experienced that because this snake was so curious about me and was all over me, and my ordinary experience in life, snakes avoid human contact, it gave this sense that the snake did have the consciousness of the god, that the god was coming to me in snake form. And then the dream went on to have this extra bit where in the avaton, the avaton is part of the sleeping dormitory, and avaton means the place that cannot be trod upon, like it's somewhere that you can't enter. It's the inner sanctum. And in my dream, the avaton was the place where the priests were actually conducting surgeries and operations, because we know that the physicians did perform actual real operations there as well. And then they were feeding the serpents like slithers of pieces of the diseased organs that they'd cut out of the patients. I mean, I didn't think that was necessarily true. This is where you need to check your epiphanies. But in the dream, it was just a kind of, it was a I guess a graphic portrayal of this sacrament of illness. How, there's this idea in the Avaton that your sick self dies in the underworld with this chthonic Asclepius, and the healthy self is reborn. And there's this relationship in Greek mythology between Hypnos and Thanatos, who are brothers, death and sleeping, and that there, when you sleep, you are in the underworld, and it's the same place that you're going to go to when you die. And so it's good to be able to navigate that space in dreaming.
Wow, I bet you'd be a really fun person to go to Greece with and go sleep in some temples
I'm
and
the
kind of
most fun
hang
person to
out.
go to Greece with. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a retreat in September. I do like four a year. So September's an amazing time to be in Greece because the weather's beautiful and it's quiet. It's still off season. So yeah, it's
Well, you
perfect.
folks in the UK and Europe are so lucky that you've got easy access to, place like Crete or Greece. Like,
Yeah,
um,
I do feel very lucky about that.
yeah,
But actually,
nicely,
the
nicely
vast
done,
majority, the vast majority of people who are coming on the retreats are American and Canadian.
Hmm.
So, and one of the things I'm really noticing actually is, I don't know, I guess it's a modern consciousness thing that Americans and Canadians are coming over and being like, this is my home. This is where I'm from. They know it, they recognize it,
Hmm.
they feel it. And it's this great experience for them.
Mm. I'm a little afraid to go because just because of that the feeling of homecoming might be too great for me to be able to return and not die of homesickness. You know, I already feel homesick and I don't want to make it any worse.
Yeah. Well, you know, I am very glad that the COVID lockdowns happened before I started regularly doing these retreats in Greece, because I think I would have been heartbroken by, you know, now I'm renting a
Mm.
little house in Epidavros, and the thought of not being able to go to that little house, I can't imagine. I
It'd
love
be
it.
too much to bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you also doing something coming up with Rupert Sheldrake?
I'm doing a dream pilgrimage in Hastings. So I've been working with Rupert and the British Pilgrimage Trust to reintroduce this idea of sleeping in sacred sites to pilgrimage in the UK. So I've done one previously with him before, and it's an idea that he wanted to do, and we sort of simultaneously had been interested in dream incubation. Rupert's Christian, and so some of the sites we've been doing are Christian sites, but he's also very open-minded.
Hmm.
So I would also like to do Paleolithic and pagan sites as well. I mean, one of the
Well,
areas.
most of the Christian sites are formerly pagan sites,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. You know, this is another reason why I love Greece so much, actually, is you get a real sense that the kind of mysteries were embedded into Greek Orthodoxy. And
Yeah. Hmm.
especially at a time like Easter, it feels positively Dionysian. And the adoration and the reverence for the Virgin is the all whole holy goddess. Like it's just all goddesses.
Hmm. Yeah. So the thing with in Hastings, is that open to the public? Can anyone come,
Mm.
or is it invite only?
No, it's open to the public, and we go on a walk through Hastings Country Park, which is like absolutely beautiful. And there are like little waterfalls and streams, and there's a what we call a gill, a fern gully, essentially.
Hmm.
And it we go along the cliff tops of Hastings, and it's lovely. It's and then there's a old sandstone quarry that we do our dream incubation practice in, and it's amazing there because there's all this lichen and moss on the ground, and so that it's like a soft bed to lie on. So it's always my
Oh,
favorite place to do incubation.
amazing. Yeah, it's evoking like images of Arthurian legend, Merlin. Please do a dream incubation and try to like get some more information about Merlin for us, would you?
Okay.
This like Western shamanic figure who
Yeah.
I think needs more attention.
I have drank from the physician's well in Wales. I'm going to do an occult conference in South Wales on the 2nd of November. And I love Wales. My great nan was Welsh. And I went and did a an experiment in the Brecon Beacons once when I was doing internet dating. I went on a Tinder date with a neuroscientist, and we were doing remote viewing experiments near the Lady of the
First
Lake.
date?
Yeah, first date. I was like, you know, because internet dating is usually pretty boring, I was like, I got her up the ante a little bit. So we met in a shepherd's hut in the Brecon Beacons, and we did remote viewing experiments. And he was like a kind of Bear Grylls type that was just super outdoorsy. And we went for a walk to this famous mythological lake where the Lady of the Lake myth comes from. And as we were walking, it was getting dark and snowing, and we were walking through bogs. And I started to think, what on earth have I done? Why am I in the middle of the Brecon Beacons with this person? I don't know who they are. And I had this kind of out of body experience. It was really weird. I just fell to the ground. And then after a little while, I kind of recalibrated, got back up, carried on walking. And then I was quite thirsty. So he gave me one of these like survival straws, and I drank out of the bog. And this bog water was
Oh my God.
the physician's well, this like sacred spring in Wales that these magical physicians who probably were related to Merlin somehow, or these
Mhm.
kind of mythological figures that supposedly are descendants of the man who married the lady who emerged from the lake. There's a lot of parallels with Greek healing and mythological traditions in Wales, actually. Anyway, this physician's well water miraculously revived me, and then I felt like I could walk until 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I had like an astral projection experience when I was sleeping. I had like sleep paralysis, came out of my body, and my kind of spirit body drifted by the side of my body lying in bed. And I was making these tiny little micro movements because I remember reading once that when you have sleep paralysis, the things that move are your eyeballs and your obviously breathing faculties, but also the tips of your fingers. And it's one of the techniques of getting out of sleep paralysis actually is moving, just gently moving the tips of your fingers rather than trying to make big dramatic movements. Um, anyway, as I was moving the tips of my fingers, I was constructing these like beautiful geometric snowflake patterns. And I remember thinking at the time, the reason why I had that out of body experience and the astral projection type experience was because I'd had this earlier, like fear of death experience. It was weird. It was like a near death experience because I felt like I popped out of my ordinary timeline for a while and then came back into my body and was reanimated and revived. So there's also something about these out of body experiences, these experiences of dying in dreams or in psychedelics that act as a catalyst for rebirth and personal evolution. So they have value in that as well.
Mhm. Well, that's a great story. I'm glad I asked. You definitely sound like a fun person to hang out with, and I really appreciate you.
I got another dude on internet dating to take me to the sleep temple at Gloucestershire as well. Because, may as well go. I had this idea that if you're
Okay.
going to go on an internet date, you may as well make it some sort of quest.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a way to kind of suss out the person like straight off. Like, am I going to be too weird for them? Are they going to be interesting enough for me? Well, let's find out.
Exactly. I learned a lot because I kind of thought I only like, it's only really fun if it's an interesting person who's into weird stuff.
Hmm.
So my searches would just be archaeologist, neuroscientist, or, I'd go according to things that I was interested in. So yeah, it was valuable education.
That's great. Well, thanks a lot for spending time with me today. I
Oh,
appreciate
it's
it.
been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And yeah, I recommend everyone check out your book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries. It's out now on Inner Traditions, right?
Yeah.
Great. And then your website for any information on upcoming retreats and online classes, and you do, yeah, Zoom gatherings and things like that.
Yeah. Themysteries.org. And that's got everything on it.
Great. Well, thanks so much, and
My
we'll see you in
pleasure.
dream time.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, bye,
Bye-bye.
Brian.